What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, a dickhead at a desk here, and we are back with episode 134 of the video game therapy series. I just kind of suck at these now. I can't seem to ever. It's not even like I don't even try to do them half the time because I just know that I'm gonna trail off at about 10 minutes, and then we're left with nothing. I'm not even sure what the change is because I don't even. I'm not sure. It's maybe just the motivation or energy to sit down for even what should be a relatively trivial excursion. Still posing problems for me, but anyway, I don't know. I'll see if I can get through this one today, just because I haven't done this in a while, and I always feel some cathartic sense of satisfaction, even if it's rooted in nothing. Right? It's kind of the satisfaction of like no one cares, but if you feel better about it, then fine. That kind of level of satisfaction. It's not really something that you know, anyone should be justified in feeling satisfied of, but for me, for some reason, just producing anything and being done with something, I guess, is enough of a satisfaction for me. So anyway, yeah. First thing I was thinking about was I guess when people that claim that like war is natural. It's like or like conflict of any kind is natural, which I will extend the olive branch there to say that I do think that there is some in nature, not even just humans, but there is some uh there isn't necessarily a natural aversion to conflict. Conflict does happen across species and within species. They do there is a certain level of conflict that's reasonable. But I think that if you extend that, like that's kind of like talking about like two ants fighting over, a raisin or something like that. Or ants probably wouldn't do that just because they're more, they're more mutualistic, I think. But fine, even two monkeys or two sharks or something, fighting over a piece of meat or something. That part being normal, where it's like okay, I will agree with you and say that it's normal that a monkey might punch another monkey or butt heads with it or something. But I think extending that to mean that the modern manifestation of war is normal, like with all of our guns and tanks and shit, absolutely not. That is not at all normal. Because if it was, we would see people, veterans would come back, would be like, a veteran would come back with their leg blown off, and it would seem to them just like they just got done tanning, right? There wouldn't be like serious post traumatic stress that they go through. And one could argue that like this is just weak blood, like these are just pussies that can't like put it all behind them. But I think anyone that says that who hasn't experienced all of those horrors firsthand, like some kind of you know joyless robot running around and just murdering people. Like that level of horror is not something that normal people are around every day. Now it's kind of going in that direction where we are seeing things that are uh, much more terrifying on the technology front, at least. But I disagree with the idea that like that kind of war is at all normal, right? I think any normal human is not a sociopath should have a natural aversion to that kind of conflict. That isn't really the conflict that I'm talking about, like fighting over a tree or something. In the case of monkeys, a robot sniper, taking legs off of civilians is not. That's not at all normal at all, right? It's not like we just wouldn't, we wouldn't have so many veterans that come home just super fucked up in the head from war if it was really natural. So like I agree. I guess to summarize all of this, I agree with saying that conflict is a normal, predisposition of humans. We do tend to have conflicts over certain things that I think is at least, arguably normal. But like war as we know it, like modern war being normal, I think is insane. Like that, not at all. Uh, I suppose if I guess there's besides being like a medic or not even a medic, maybe like a cyber guy, maybe like if you're running around in like the cyber warfare, like even that's not normal because it's not normal. We're not built to be typing at computers at all. Um, but I think just I don't know the horrors of modern war don't um, are not what I would call at all natural. So I just think that part is ridiculous. So maybe conflict is, but war is certainly not. Where is this cave? Anyway, I guess the other thing I was thinking about, I wonder. I was looking at license plates. Maybe they're different in different countries, or different places or whatever. But I guess here in the Burger Land, the great US of A, license plates generally, if you, unless you make a custom one, which I guess you're allowed to have custom license plates. I guess they I don't know, they cost extra or something, but they come with three letters and then a bunch and then four numbers most of the time, separated by a hyphen. So it's 8 characters, but the fourth character is generally always a hyphen. And I'm wondering if they, because with three characters of the alphabet, you can get a lot of what one might call offensive license plates. Just because I was driving and I saw a license plate like it was like KK, D or something like that. And I was like, well, I was only one off of like, KKK, which would be, I imagine, a problematic license plate, not one that they would want to print. So I wonder if there's a list, like at the DMV or wherever they print these license plates, that were like, all right, we're going to avoid all of these, like these permutations of this. And I guess I'm still on the lookout for like these rare, other ones would be like, Jew or ass or something like that. Those would be other kind of rare license plate finds. I don't think they're. If I had to guess, they probably do filter out a number of them so they don't people don't get like, you don't come to the office, you don't come to the DMV office and get Jew 420 like as your license plate. And you're like, what the fuck is this? Why did I why did I get this as my license plate, my plate number? Either way, I just thought it was funny to think about like them having to get at some point they didn't have that, and then they printed out ass or something, or any number of fuck FUK, or FCK or something like that, and they're like, oh wait a second, we should probably put in a safeguard so that we don't get these words on our license plates. I think that's funny. Anyway, yeah, let's move on to something else. Here, I suppose the carrot and stick metaphor is always a favorite of mine, just because of its I don't know, its simplicity and the implications and its applicability to many different scenarios. It's a very nicer way of going about uh, abstractions on incentives, right? Like incentives are much easier to comprehend if you think about if it's all about carrots and sticks. Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. It's the same thing. I'm just not going to say those words every single time. It's just a carrot or a stick. But I wonder now if, because I think people, and maybe it's just a recognition from, a technocracy that carrots, that sticks are stronger incentives, at least in the short term, than carrots. So, if you're, I guess you're thinking about if you're, because human behavior has been controlled as long as society has existed. We'll say it's not like in the beginning, like nobody was ever thinking about, oh, how do we control people and make them more obedient, or how do we make them agree, not even agree to slavery, but like put up with it or not, revolt on an individual level. Because I mean, in theory, if I guess if you're trying to enslave a certain populace and they just said no, and there was no like manipulation, and then it would just be a fist fight at every point. It's like if imagine if every single it's like almost a coordinated like we're just not doing this, that kind of thing would happen at every single juncture. But at some point, there was enough manipulation, or whether it sticks and carrots, probably a lot more sticks than carrots, I would imagine. Uh, maybe the carrot to get them on the boat, but then a stick after that. Uh, they probably realized how much stronger sticks were than carrots in terms of incentives. But I do think that sticks eventually have their they fade out, they get dull, and unless you're going to be investing in larger, bigger, and sharper sticks at every juncture, at some point, you have a dull stick, and then the person you've been whipping is going to fashion a stick out of anything and start beating the shit out of you with it. And that's kind of like maybe the whole history, or the whole a simplification on just human, conflict in general. It's like humans throughout time have all like kind of suffered through beatings, and at some point they've had enough, and then there's revolution of some kind, and then there's a new normal, and there's new kind of a new social contract that we sign, and not even really sign, but we agree upon. It's like, all right, it's like we're not doing slavery. Nobody's slaves. Like, all right, okay, fine. Like, well, democracy is preferred. Okay, fine. But now that like democracy is kind of falling apart and a lot of issues with that, right? I think at some point, the powers that be will can resort more to sticks than carrots. So just sharpening their sticks in whatever way possible. And then at some point, that does have an end. At some point, I feel like unless it's you truly believe in like you know, the end of our I guess the quote unquote end. It wouldn't be the literal end, but kind of the end of humans as we know it would be like a Matrix type end or a Big Brother or something. Um, in that case. But I do think I don't know. I don't think that will be the end of humanity. Would be something like that. I don't know. I'm not convinced that's where things fall. I think that would be true if you know sticks always prevailed. Right. There was never a time where society needed to switch to carrots. Meaning that it was all like negative incentives. Meaning if you do this, I'll beat you up. Right. There's always some problem. It's like they don't. It's not a. You're not you don't get a choice in terms of like, oh, like pick between two good things, or like, you don't have to do any of it if you don't want to. It's always like you have to do something, otherwise we'll do this. And it's like, all right, well now you're threatening me, so I have to do something. That's kind of the modality I think that um, maybe most institutions or most businesses and things are now kind of organizing around. It's less about the carrot structure, which would be like, well, what do you want to do? It's like, oh, if we can't help you, it's okay. Like, you don't have to. We're not forcing you to do anything. We won't, do what you want to do. But instead, it's like, well, you have to do this, otherwise, this horrible thing will happen, or we'll do this, or there's no. So I don't know. I just ruminating on the implications of a society putting down or kind of you know avoiding lots of uh, the carrots, and even like the carrots they are, you could like they're proverbial like mushy carrots. Are not There's no good carrots anymore. It's all crap. They're rotten carrots or something. I don't know. There's probably a more elegant way to put it that way, but I don't know. I'm just interested in thinking about that. Uh, let's see. I was thinking about this is a kind of a stupid idea, but like podcasts are all big now, and most people listen to different podcasts. I don't, a lot of them don't say much, but I was wondering if what I guess it'd be interesting at least to have like a AI co-host. You could obviously have pretty good control over what a host would do. Like make it interrupt you with certain things or have things you want to cover, and when you want it to agree with you or whatever, you can say it. And obviously it wouldn't be. So my whole idea here, the pitch is that it's a podcast, except one person is real and the other one is not. Uh, but it's not like that's not known to the audience. Everyone knows that like it's a bot. It's not like you could even call the podcast like robot abuse or something like that. And so if at any point the humans just over there insulting the robot or something, or telling it to shut up or something, and it kind of has to listen because it's not like it's a human with agency and is gonna like argue. I guess you could make it argue and that'd be fun. But I don't know how much. I mean, maybe that would be fun. It's just making a very argumentative co-host, and then you just spend the whole time just kind of arguing with the robot, which is honestly that actually is pretty inspiring to me. I think I might, if I have some extra time on my hands, I might, you know, begin to look into that a little bit, making a co-host whose whole job is to be as argumentative and obnoxious as possible. Uh, Not in a way that isn't, intelligent. It's not like it's, oh, you're ugly, you're fat. Like that's not. That wouldn't be entertaining. But I think if they had, you know, genuine rebuttals and stuff that wasn't, as long as it was just citing like fake studies or something, as long as its argumentation was rhetorical in nature and not, quantitative. I think that'd be a very very interesting pitch, I suppose. And I don't know, maybe it wouldn't be a long standing thing, but that would be interesting concept to say the least. Um, yeah. Anyway, I'll move on to something else here. Um, yeah. Let's see what I was thinking about. Let me go back to my list here. Mm. Yeah, this was an interesting. I didn't know this, but I guess I do now, and now you will. So the word, like in Greek, when they were speaking about a poet, I guess the Greek word for poet is means like maker or like of some kind. It's not really creator. I think it is a little bit different than a creator. So it's not like you're some kind of god as a poet, but poet was a very maybe a very catch-all term for somebody that created something, right? And maybe in the case of the poet, you think they create works of literature of some kind. So even like authors in some way were still poets. But I think being regarded as a poet in, you know, I guess Greek times was kind of the highest praise because it wasn't like, you know, I guess in English you'd think of a poet as just someone that writes stupid little poems and limericks and haikus or something like that. Whereas poet just kind of meant like a generic maker. They like make stuff. Um, obviously this stuff is artistic in nature and isn't like it's not like they're a blacksmith or something. That's a different kind of maker. Uh, but they're still referred to in a kind of a general sense as somebody that makes things, which I think is a fascinating way to I don't know to think about artists of that kind. And is it certainly a it's certainly much higher praise to be like, oh, somebody that fumble fucks with words versus being like a maker, right? You're a creator of some kind. I think that's certainly very interesting to me, and I just learned that bit, so thought I would share it. Um, I guess this is a similar vein of I guess I guess respecting the artistic or metaphysical. So I was thinking about just like the limits of materialist thought, and because often if you go down like a rabbit hole of answers to questions being strictly materialist in nature, where it's like you just get down to quantum physics, it ends up becoming kind of like it's not really helpful after a certain point. It's like sure, like maybe like chemical interactions are helpful, to diagnose I don't know supplement or vitamin deficiencies of some kind. Sure, I'll admit that. But then like once you're at the level of like the carbon atom, it begins to kind of lose its practicality. And not a sense it isn't accurate. I understand that still is. And if you were a researcher doing, research on tiny particles, then sure, maybe like it is still helpful to, I guess to be thinking in those terms. But for the average layperson that doesn't have access to a particle accelerator, that whole realm of reasoning is not helpful. Quarks and protons and like that isn't what am I supposed to do with any of that? Whereas it's not like at that point, kind of this materials realm doesn't. It's not gonna really put a chair together, right? Thinking about the quarks and the protons interacting, and even so, it just almost gets like religious in nature. It's like this is really there's like these particles and antiparticles. That all seems ridiculous. And I know questioning it makes you sound like a luddite or something like where you're just anti-science. Or you're not like I'm not saying that there isn't we haven't observed validity behind the claims of quantum physics and things, but I'm just arguing that it doesn't like in terms of materialism being helpful. That's kind of where you lose it, right? It's not really helpful for anyone in any practical sense for them to you know to like I guess believe in this theory of quarks and protons because at that point, what are you supposed to do with that information? How does that help you get through the day in any you know feasible way? Again, unless you're like a researcher who's interested in this stuff. So I don't know. I think where that comes in is like where knowledge and reason fail to serve you. Hope is kind of maybe what only like the real passageway left out of there. Because at some point, like especially if you're like I don't know, hopeless of some kind, or you're looking for answers and whatever, and then maybe like at the beginning, science has some answers. Oh, maybe check see if you have an iron deficiency or something, and you're kind of going whatever, and you take maybe like a medical route or something, or you're just all right. Well, I'm just interested in physics and philosophy because maybe that's kind of like the closest things to ground zero truths that we have. But I think once you enter the realm of metaphysics, it all just becomes like not only like ridiculously weird and like out there, right? Like with quarks and protons and things, but then also just it kind of loses its ability to be practical. And I think if nothing else, what any kind of philosophy should do or should aspire at least would be to be helpful, I guess, in dealing with what we know as life and how to what living even is. Whereas if a philosophy of any kind doesn't help you do anything, I don't know that that is a really that besides being an intellectual exercise, is that worthy of your time. And not to be like I guess too causal with this and saying that it has to be things have to be prudent in order. It's like everything has to be investment advice. I don't think that's it at all. I think there's a certain um, I mean that more in the context of like wisdom being helpful. Uh, how do you take this? Like wisdom itself being helpful. Whereas I think at a certain point, materialist knowledge is no longer wise, right? There's a certain wisdom. I even said it before, like there's a certain wisdom to ignorance. Not ignorance in itself, like, but there is a certain amount of ignorance that is that is wise at times, right? And it's all contextual depending on who you are and what you're doing. Like, I suppose in the example of like if you're an athlete, like you don't need to be acutely aware of every muscle contraction that you're doing while you're performing whatever. If you're a gymnast or something, you shouldn't be thinking deeply about how your muscles move. It needs to be like like second nature, or again, however all the coaches say it's got to be natural. You just got to like feel the motion or whatever. But it's certainly you certainly don't need to be aware of your serum potassium levels in the middle of your exercise, right? That knowledge certainly doesn't help you. All it's gonna do is just distract you from because you already have a limited focus. So at that point, you would say that, well, that certainly is knowledge. I'm not saying it isn't. Yeah, like knowing what your potassium levels are certainly does qualify as knowledge, but it certainly isn't wisdom, and at least in that context. And again, maybe a few hours later after the event, if you want to dissect why things went wrong or why you cramped up or something, then it would make sense. All right, well, you had low potassium levels. All right, cool. But like at the time, that would not have helped you at all. So that was certainly not wise at the time. So ignorance was beneficial there. So I wonder if, in just a more broad sense, not speaking about, I guess a gymnast or something, but I guess highly materialist discussions on metaphysics, again, then at that same point kind of become useless because each person is still only living and existing in one life. It's not like we're going to get, at least you're not certain that you're going to get multiple roles at your life, but instead of like spending your life, I guess, with with the practical wisdom at hand and then trying to make the best of it, you're instead kind of dousing yourself in these like you know theoretical probabilities of things that you can't see or can't know or can't validate. So it ends up becoming like, all right, well, what's the fucking point of this anyway? Doesn't the whole point of this to like help you make better decisions in some way, or to give you guidance in the case of when you're lost or something? It doesn't seem like that's what this is doing for you. This isn't really. Is this helping you, right? Like, and I suppose maybe it does help in the sense it's if all you're looking for is a distraction, right? And if you're just I guess you don't want to deal with the realities of existence, and you need I guess physics and that to I guess distract you from other things, or if you truly find a deep interest in it and a passion for it, then that's fine too. But I don't know if you enter into philosophy as a way of I guess understanding and having a I guess more conviction in knowing what to do, or what to value or what to accomplish with your life. I don't know that that really helps you at that point. So it's not that you should abandon reason entirely. It's just that understand that reason is only one dimension of our intelligence, and one dimension of intelligence. Period. Right? There's an intelligence of taste, and like I said before, there's many different types of forms of and manifestations of intelligence. It's not like there is some like true IQ. I guess people will claim that IQ is intelligence, but IQ is the test itself is just these stupid puzzles, right? Who came up with these puzzles? Did he have a perfect IQ? It's like, how do we even know that knowing this puzzle and not knowing that one makes you smarter than someone else? It's like, maybe I'm not, and there's even just bias within like the language and the symbols themselves, right? Especially if you show me symbols that all mean something very specific to me, but symbols that might mean nothing to someone else, they might be a lot better at spotting the pattern because those symbols don't have inherent meaning to them already. But if you show me a symbol that has meaning to me, I'm going to be distracted by, okay, well, this means something. I know what this means already. It's like, wait a second, no, this is different context. Doesn't mean that. But someone with no context hasn't pre-assigned meaning to these symbols already. So then it's like, all right, well, in the pattern recognition systems, it would the test would grade me as having poorer pattern recognition skills because I didn't recognize his pattern. But in reality, all I was distracted by a pattern that I recognized as something else. But I had to like ignore that, right? Which is still like that's still not really fair. That's a confounding variable, with regard to intelligence itself. But either way, there certainly isn't any absolute IQ that is at least one that I would respect. I don't. Um, there's intelligence of like taste and intelligence of I don't know, maybe a physical intelligence or like an intuition. It's like I'm not here to shit on LeBron, but LeBron probably isn't I wouldn't trust him to, have pattern recognition skills on math. But, there's certainly a dimension of physical intelligence to him that you could say that he's a genius or something. But most of that is beyond his ability to articulate whatever that is, right? It's not like he is acutely aware of every muscle contraction that results in him being able to jump, 60 feet in the air. Um, any more than a non-mathematician could think their way into some new theorem. That's just not. It's there's again just comparing apples to oranges, which you can do by the way. People always say it's like, well, it's apples to oranges. You can't compare that. I can compare apples and oranges. They're both fruit. They're both sweet. They're both about the size of a baseball or so, right? They're both colorful. They both could be shades of red and orange-ish, right? It's like I can still compare apples to oranges, right? It's like other things that maybe aren't or are less comparable is like I don't know, like even things that just even two things from different areas, like a pair of underwear and an apple. Like, all right, these are two things that are much less comparable than apples and oranges. Apple and oranges are both foods in the same kind of group. They're both fruits. They both have seeds, I suppose. I don't even know who blew up where. Uh, yeah, they both have seeds. Whereas like a dress is like, all right, it's an article of clothing. An orange, and it's not. It's not similar to a orange in that sense. You don't really wear an orange. But you could say an orange and a dress are similar in the sense that they're both involved in human affairs. Like I don't know, humans interact with or are capable of viewing both a dress and an orange. So like in that way, they're I guess somewhat similar. But even though you have a much harder time comparing those two things than apples and oranges. It's just funny that that was what the idiom that we kind of decided on was apples and oranges, even though they are pretty fucking similar. So I don't know. You can totally compare apples and oranges. I just did, and I'll do it again. So I don't know. Anyway, move on to something else here. What is this guy doing? Um, so this is related to, I guess, the discussion on, it's somewhat related to the discussion on, I guess, suppose on metaphysics and things. You know, humans are notorious and are extremely capable at making things as complicated as we want. Right? We can like complicating things. If you gave me some kind of system or anything, I could again conjure up a bunch of new things and make it infinitely more complicated than it needs to be, right? I could just define new terms, define those terms in vague-ish ways, or even if I try to get as atomic as I could in thinking about these new terms that I'm defining, there's still a lot of error and difficulty in doing such. But um, we certainly have no shortage of talent for making things much more complicated than they need to be. Uh, but the question is, does it like complexity doesn't always help us, right? Especially like I guess using a technology system for example, right? Like you want to make a website and you want to I don't know, you want to post little tweets or something like you have a blog page. You don't need to go the most complicated route possible and set up like a whole database system of things. And sure, maybe it's like you're trading robustness or something, but you're trading all of that for complexity. And at some point, it doesn't need to be that complicated because you're not serving 80 billion requests an hour. It's not like your website's ever going to handle that amount of traffic. You could just make plain text sites like plain text pages. You don't need to do anything that crazy. But you can of course make it as complicated as you want. But ultimately, the truth is, and the necessity behind it is not there most of the time. Like you don't need to be this complicated. but you certainly can make it complicated. Same with anything else. It's like if you're, you know, I know people that are in their own heads about different things. Maybe they're in their own head about, talking to girls or something like that. Of course, you can make new terms that again make that just create this big cloud of nonsense around what is ultimately not that complicated of a thing, right? It's like don't be weird and like ask questions and stuff like that. All right, maybe that's like two good pieces of advice to give somebody who isn't sure how to talk to women. It's like, all right, well then, okay, I need to like define an axis of weird. Like what variables go into a statement as being weird. And every time I'm about to say something, I need to assess whether or not what I'm about to say, is a 6 or above on the weird axis. It's like, okay, I understand what you're trying to do here. Is you're trying to like, make it more predictable and quantify things so that you're gonna have in theory, have a higher success rate. But ultimately, it's really not that complicated. There is kind of this intuitive sense of like, is what you're about to say weird? And can you do it or not? And maybe someone with autism just doesn't have that ability to say, all right, well, this is weird and that isn't. But ultimately, again, I think many people without that kind of, uh, I guess, impairment of their intuition don't need this whole system of like, you know, uh, rating numbers on what you're saying and who you're talking to and what the probabilities of certain statements and things are. It's like there's all this and you even see this with like gurus that talk about these pickup artists and things all have these ridiculous theories and like these numbers, and some of them might have like elements. I'm not saying none of them have elements of truth to them. I'm sure there are. Maybe there's even some very preliminary crappy data to back something up, but even so, that is often doesn't is often totally unnecessary to like, because for millennia people accomplished all of this that you're trying to do, getting in bed with a girl, having children or a family or something. They accomplished all that with none of this garbage. They didn't need to know any of that. It's like even with like food, like sure we have this all food sciences and things, but we survived for millennia without knowledge of any of this. We didn't even know what carbohydrates or fat or protein, what any of that even was, and we still stayed alive for thousands of years. So it's not to say that the knowledge itself is into always and like anything that's complicated at all should be thrown out. I'm not saying that, but in general, we have a tendency, especially as the world itself gets more complicated, to then prefer more complicated explanations for things, or more complicated abstractions on what to do and you know how to respond to in different situations. When maybe the reality is it's just not that complicated, and we don't need to complicating things does not help. So I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on that. Just because I feel like we just move closer and closer towards more and more complicated things for little to no reason. It's not like it is super helpful for us to accept and run with all these very complicated abstractions on things, when things maybe sometimes just aren't that complicated. So I don't know. We love complicating things. Let's see. What else do we have? Um, hmm, this is a little dangerous, but whatever. Yeah, I guess I can talk about this. So there was this. I don't even know who did this, but I'm gonna take this and riff with it. So I guess too bad. Whoever wants credit for this. Somebody. It was a philosopher of some inclination somewhere at some point said something like this, that there are four like categories of people. I don't think it's fair to say these people are always in one of these categories. There certainly is a lot of movement throughout these different realms that the person is. You're allowed to move freely between things. It's simply what any one person is being at a given time. So it's not like it's an absolute designation on any of this. Um, but he said, they or whoever, I forgot who said this, so there are four types of people. And you can view them quite neatly on like a two-dimensional or a two-axis graph, where there's, on the one side is like gain or loss for yourself, and the other side is gain or loss for others. So the first person, and you'll see where this is going once I introduce them. The first person is this helpless person, which is their actions and their decisions, or a given decision, results in a uh, loss for themselves and a gain for others. So this would be like, I guess, quintessentially like somebody doing slave labor. It's like they're doing everything at their own expense, but for the benefit of someone else. Someone's at least profiting in some way, some abstraction from their work, but they're suffering, right? Like they're giving your kidney to someone else. That's kind of this helpless person. The next is a bandit person, which is kind of the opposite of that. They steal something for themselves. As they're stealing a kidney from someone else, right? They're maybe the slave owners. They're getting something in return for nothing. So it's a gain for themselves and a loss for others. And this other doesn't have to be an individual person. It could be just like society at large, or any other group or of any. It really could be anybody. It's not like it's I guess a stringent definition on self versus others. Um, the next is the stupid person, which is someone that again through what you would expect is stupid behavior. It's a loss for themselves and a loss for others. So they're just like shooting somebody in the foot for no reason. It's like you didn't have to do that. You did that for no reason. Now it's like now we're both worse off because you got to deal with I guess paying my medical bills or something, and then I have a bullet on my foot. So it's like just all around a negative situation. Nobody really wins with stupid people making decisions, because it's a loss for everyone. Everyone loses. Whereas the bandits, or at least are like, all right, at least they're winning. It's like we at least know that there is some kind of net gain. So the utilitarians are at least somewhat pleased with the bandit because at least there's a gain somewhere. And then the last person, which is the most important, or the last type of decision, is the intelligent, which is a gain for themselves and a gain for others, which I think requires, again, which one might call the really true form of intelligence is being able to produce a gain, in the absence of anything, without causing loss to someone else. So I think this is a interesting or neat way to think about decisions and how they impact things. I think many decisions now. So you could put this in the context of like a an AI company of some sort. It's like, all right, well, their entire business is predicated on what? Like, is this what kind of decisions are they making? Or is it generally a bandit company where they're selling ads to people, or kind of fucking people over in exchange for their money? Or is it a stupid thing where they're both losing? It's like their company sucks, it's not going anywhere, and they're fucking people over, and it's just going to be an all around negative situation once once the shit truly hits the fan with these people. Or is it in some ways intelligence, where there's a gain for other people and a gain for themselves, and they're just kind of they're using a LLC to actually realize that gain, which I think, maybe, I don't know, more often than not that is unfortunately not the case, but no matter, it still is possible, I guess, technically. So I don't know. I just thought it was interesting to think about decisions, or people in those terms. I think maybe not people themselves in those categories, but decisions certainly I think fit better into that whole paradigm, because you can categorize a decision as intelligent, or a decision as stupid, or a bandit-like decision, or you can do all of that without saying like, all right, well, every decision you make is stupid. It's like it's those people that maybe there's people that are have a propensity to make stupid decisions. That's fine, but that's in my mind totally different than like a I don't know. I think everyone has the capability to make intelligent decisions. It's just in what context and at what frequency do you actually make those decisions? Or maybe your decisions are more bandit-like, and you're constantly kind of suckling stuff from other people, or is it more helpless-esque, where you are benefiting someone else, but you're just not really ever looking out for yourself. So it's not like you're not stupid, but you're not making decisions that are deemed intelligent. Which I was thinking about, just about trying to define intelligence, because that's often a very I don't know, it's a slippery slope and a difficult thing to bring up. Is like, what is intelligent behavior? And I think this abstraction on it is pretty useful at the very least, or at least interesting to think about as a potential for I guess trying to determine non-intelligent behavior from intelligent behavior. But in that sense, we'd have to give the badge or the award of intelligence to many things that we wouldn't really consider having intelligence. So like an ant or something, like those classic like what do they call them, like a mutualistic or symbiotic relationship. Like a barnacle and a whale or something like that. They both kind of win because the barnacle, or I don't know, maybe that's like a leech or something. I don't know. Either way, there's like relationships where both people win. It's like they are picking stuff out of each other's teeth, and like the bird gets food and the lion gets free dental cleaning or something. So like that, that would have to be considered intelligent because it's a win-win for both parties. So, but I think many people are quick to say that, like, the form of intelligence that a lion or a bird has is not, nothing compared to what we have. So then it's like, all right, well, maybe that definition of intelligence is too vague to be helpful in the context of like determining a computer program. Because you can certainly say that, I guess a computer program doing something is helpful for us, but then is it at the cost of what? In terms of, it's a negative on electricity. Like running a computer program is always going to cost electricity in some way. There's no way to kind of offset that. Now you can make it carbon neutral, but at that point that still kind of is a bandit relationship where it's you're benefiting, but then there's a loss. Maybe like a loss in the abstract in the sense that you're using electricity to perform something. So it's not ever that you can actually produce a gain from a computing system. Whereas an animal or something that its life isn't, I guess, that quantifiable in terms of measuring it in wattage or something like that. Isn't really isn't worth it. And plus, the computer itself doesn't get anything out of it. It's not like at least it's not like computers enjoy doing the work that we tell it to do. Right, most of it's crap. It's like that's the whole reason we're making the computer do it in the first place is because we don't want to do it. Or it's annoying to do, or it's better at it than us. Any number, but in general, it's just because we would rather have someone else do it than us. Right? Otherwise, we would, take great joy in doing it, or just seeing if it's possible to do. Right? Same with like, in the case of like creating art and stuff. It's not like we enjoy the artists that make art enjoy making it, and they would if it was their choice, they wouldn't have AI making art. But people do it just because they're curious to know whether or not an AI system can do this. But the AI system itself isn't necessarily benefiting from, I guess you could give it a cookie or, some, but then who are you getting that cookie from? You're taking the cookie out, and, there's just not any way to do it where you could, where I could see you could frame a human computer relationship as I'll say as an intelligent one where it's, both parties are benefiting because you don't know how, like, because a computer itself is not is not a system that I guess we've anthropomorphized to the extent of knowing whether what's good for it or not. You know, I guess besides like just keeping it clean. But again, that itself is not like it doesn't like being clean, or it just performs better when it's clean. So it's like simply that again is kind of a benefit to us if we want the computer to last a long time. So I don't know. It's just interesting to think about intelligence in that way as like win-wins, because then at every time where there is like a theoretical you know piece of a theoretical action that is supposed to be smart, it's like, all right, well then we have to calculate gains and losses across the board, right? Like who gained and who lost in this scenario. So if an AI company found out a new way to predict, I don't know, banana growing. It's like, all right, well then how much electricity did that cost? And, who else is impacted by this decision? It's like, all right, well, we have to lay off 8,000 banana workers. It's like, all right, well then maybe, is this really an intelligent decision if it's like, if it's causing all of this like downtrodden problems, or all these problems down the line? Is it really an intelligent decision at that point? And sure, like in maybe one very small dimension is intelligent, but that's a stupid way to look at it because you're ignoring all of the other externalities. Um, it's also kind of brazen to assume that you can know every possible causality of of a behavior or an action, and then be able to compare those with one another. Right? There are many people trading stuff. It's like, well, I don't know. I have a use for a table, you don't. I'll trade you this banana because you're hungry for this table. It's like, okay, well, maybe we could have money to try to like compare these two things, but ultimately we don't know how great the banana was for the person or how useful the table is. So it's hard to know, is that table worth a banana in this context? I don't know. It really depends on the person. So that's also kind of another factor why it makes it so difficult to compare these things. But it's still, I think it's a smarter way, or and I guess without being uh, annoying. It's a more intelligent way to view what you might call intelligence than just like, oh, can it do something cool? Or like, can it do something that we can do? All right, then yes, it's an intelligent decision. It's like, well, no, if it's actively harming many other things, like what are the implications of all the other externalities of this action? It's like, then no, it's not a smart thing to do. Um, Even if the action itself is like could be deemed smart in some other context. Giving away a banana or selling a table or something. So I don't know. Um, yeah. I suppose I've also been thinking about, I guess nothing. I don't know. Doing nothing as like a skill of sorts. And I've said this before, but I said everything up probably before already. So it's not it's not like I'm not already kind of retraining myself on whatever data I've already put out into the void here. But doing nothing as a skill, I think, given that there's this not a requirement, but there's just always this push that like to be doing something, whether it's like a push for to be more productive or a push to accomplish more, or have some kind of whatever it is. There's always like action is always better than inaction, which again on the surface I do. On the zeroth dimension, I do agree with that analysis. I do think, in general, doing something is better than doing nothing. But I think also the ability to do nothing at all, or it's not the value nothing, or to do nothing in perpetuity. I think the ability to momentarily do nothing and to be able to just kind of observe and exist and to be, I think, is a skill in and of itself of high value. Now I don't have many. I'll say. I mean, I think there are many reasons for this. The first reason, the rationale for why this would be a helpful skill, would be on the basis of creative and free thinking, right? Like, I don't know that if you are constantly inundated with action and requirements and tasks and things to keep you busy and to keep your mind and your body occupied 24 hours a day, I don't know that it has much time to digest. And I think it's almost just a suppression of intuition. I think the less we uh, give our bodies and our minds kind of time to digest and to really just kind of absorb the events and things that happen in our life. I think the less ability we have to create intuitions that are powerful, and ultimately our intuitions have that's all we have to thank for where we are as a species and everything. Was kind of a lot of our intuitions, and a lot of that came with having lots and lots of idle time, both physically idle in the sense we're not like hauling hay, but also like psychologically and mentally idle. Your eyes aren't stimulated by something. You're not always reading a book. You're not always doing something or always listening to a podcast. There's kind of this like complete lack of stimulation that I think, I guess to be anthropological about it, that allows the subconscious to digest whatever the fuck is going on in your life, such that you can create a longer lasting sense of intuition. And this intuition may not even just last within your lifetime. It may be like even a genetic change. So it's like, I guess, genetic changes that result as changes to your intuition that can then last feasibly for your entire bloodline could essentially have this newfound sense of intuition that again is not ever something we might be able to quantify or know, or understand the value of. So it's like I don't know that. Sure, on the surface, there's no. I can't give you numbers to back up why I think doing nothing is important. Uh, but I think beyond that line of reasoning, I think there is a lot of merit there. And people without the ability to do nothing are often plagued by I think poor and rash decision making, because they think there's always there's some panic into making quick decisions or having, the decision needs to be made. When oftentimes it's not really the case. You often have a little bit more time. There's often room to reflect in between making any kind of decision. But I think this kind of panic-stricken mode of like doing something, as a perpetual way of existing is problematic on that front at least, because you don't give your body and mind time and space to kind of mull over and think things. So I think our brains, sure, it's like we have 80 trillion neurons or something. I think they truly are a lot smarter than we give it credit for. It's like, sure, we can, you know, uh, if someone doesn't know their multiplication table, we can just call them stupid. But that doesn't. I don't think that really, it appreciates the gravity of what the human brain has evolved and is capable of doing. And I think a lot of the most powerful things that the human brain is capable of, requires, again, some space and some time to digest things. It's not like, and digest things in a figurative sense, not literally. Um, but I think a lot of our strongest intuitions and our powers really come from, that time. Like they kind of arise out of I'll call a subconscious digestion. And then, at some point it realizes itself in some sort of conscious action. But, I guess the more that you, kind of don't allow yourself to digest or don't give yourself time or space to let your mind just kind of be, you're kind of halting and retarding that dimension of, I guess, human intelligence. So, anyways, that's kind of an interesting aside, but I'll wrap it up there for this time. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.